Here's a question for you. How often should you upgrade your computer? The other day I got a comment on the channel when I said that I upgrade my laptop every 3 years, to the effect of, are you insane? You know, a good MacBook Pro should last you at least 10 years. And yeah, that's kind of a valid point. Which camp do you fall into? Are you the kind of person that likes to upgrade your laptop with the latest version all the time? Or are you more of the school of keeping old machines going for longer than you probably should? It's an interesting question. Let's discuss. And since it is a beautiful day today, I'm going to go outside. We don't always get beautiful sunshine here in the UK, and especially not in March, and especially not with weather that's warm enough to go outside in a t-shirt. This is the beautiful place where our studio is located. We're in a very rural area. I was thinking about Apple's release cycle, but this kind of applies to PC manufacturers as well. And for the longest time, or at least it feels like a very long time, you'd go through updates to laptops and desktop processors, and it was really kind of incremental improvements. Now take, for example, the computer that sticks in my mind here is the 27-inch iMac, and the last two generations of that. So I think one was early 2019, and the follow-up was later in 2020. Now you could get that 2019 iMac with a Core i9 processor, an 8-core processor. I think it was the 9900K in the 2019 model, and that was a beast of a processor at the time. It was a fantastic computer. I had one of those with the Vega 48 GPU, and it was brilliant. And then the following year, maybe 18 months later, something like that, they brought out the new model with the 10th generation of the same chip. So again, an 8-core i9, but a generation forward. And I think it was something like 1% improved, if that, on single core. It's probably less than 1%. In fact, I wouldn't mind betting that on if you put two of these things side by side, you probably find that they're pretty even when it comes to single core performance. And then there was the multi-core performance, and I think that was something like 6% improved. So anybody who had the 2019 iMac was never going to rush out and buy the 2020 version on the basis of those incremental improvements. And that kind of stagnation that Intel had for the longest time is one of the key reasons why Apple started making their own chips. When Apple came out with their M1 chip, it was like kablam. They totally shifted our expectations in what we would have from a laptop and a desktop computer. In the laptop sphere, we had full desktop performance, but with incredibly long battery life. And for the desktop machines, I mean, they were just incredible. It had an incredible GPU with it. It was game-changing. And there's this kind of sense that they call Intel napping. But they really shouldn't have been napping, because it was obviously going to happen. For several years, Apple had been making these chips better and better and better. And people were doing benchmarks on the iPhone and the iPad and getting results that were better than Core i7 laptops. You know, top-of-the-range laptops were getting beaten, admittedly in synthetic benchmarks, by these early Apple Silicon chips. What's happened since is Intel stopped stagnating. They started actually making progress again, and AMD has also moved the game on. And the chips that they're making now are a world away from what we were getting 5 years ago in 2020. So now there seems to be a more compelling reason to upgrade your machine, particularly if you're on a machine that predates 2020. You're going to see an absolute huge leap forward when you do upgrade, whether you're upgrading your PC or whether you're switching to an Apple Silicon Mac. It's night and day. What we're getting now is amazing. Let's just go back to Apple a minute and talk about their release cycle, because one of the things that Apple is really good at is the FOMO. It's the fear of missing out. That kind of expectation, there's always a new chip coming and it's always going to be much faster, because we have seen fairly big leaps forward with the various generations of Apple Silicon. And particularly now we've got to the point with M4, just 3 years after M1, that it is a massive leap forward again. Replacing your laptop or your computer after 3 years, does that make sense? Or are we moving ever closer towards this kind of throwaway culture that we have with our mobile phones? A lot of people replace their mobile phones on a 2-3 year cycle. So are our computers becoming commoditized like smartphones? I'm not sure that's a good thing. I do replace my laptop every 3 years or so. But what I'm talking about there is my business laptop, the thing that I use for work. So it's kind of like a work tool. And I think the criteria for assessing how long you keep a work tool is very different to a consumer. If you're a consumer and you're going to go and drop £3 on an expensive MacBook, then yes, of course, you want it to last longer than 3 years. Of course you do. But businesses will make that decision on different criteria. And for me, it's kind of important that I stay current. Was there anything particularly wrong with the M1 Max notebook that I replaced? Just one thing, and that's battery life. And that's the issue with notebooks. If you're going to keep a notebook for 10 years, well, at the end of the 10 years, you won't really have any battery life left because batteries degrade. Now, that's not to say that you can't get a battery replacement. That's not hugely expensive. In fact, if you've got Apple Care, once your battery drops below 80% health, they'll replace it. Even without that, it's not an enormous sum. I can't remember exactly what it is for a battery service, but we're talking maybe $200–300, and cheaper if you went to a third-party repairer. So it's not the end of the world. You can keep these things running. Lots of other people would point to the fact that components are increasingly becoming soldered on. I mean, that is the way with all of the Apple machines, especially the SSD being soldered on, which is something, fortunately, PC manufacturers haven't done yet. An SSD is a degradable component over time. But things have moved on a lot. They're not as fragile as perhaps they once were. And the SSD in your Mac is going to last a long time, unless you're really abusing it. SSDs do wear out. Every time you write data to your SSD, it wears just a tiny little bit. But these things are much more reliable than most people think they are. Now, true, if you've got a soldered on SSD and it fails for whatever reason, and they do fail, I mean, that's true of every electronic component, some of them will fail. And if it does and you haven't backed up your data, well, then you're going to lose your data. And that's a bit annoying. Is that any different to a replaceable SSD dying with your data on it? If you haven't backed it up, you lose it. I suppose it's more inconvenient with a Mac because it's got to go back to Apple to have a new SSD soldered on, or you've got to go to a repair shop that's competent in doing those things. Not great, but for the vast majority of people, unless you're writing enormous, and I do mean enormous volumes of data to these things, they do last. And we're not seeing widespread failures of SSDs because of overwriting. We have seen failures due to power chips blowing and that sort of thing. So that has happened with a tiny percentage of these things, but they're not just wearing out and dying after a couple of years. On your notebook with these soldered components, the thing that's probably going to fail first is the battery. And I'd say the thing that will fail or degrade next is most likely going to be the display. I mean, there's plenty of other components on your machine that will fail before the SSD does. So would you want to keep a laptop for 10 years and squeeze every piece of longevity out of it? Now, I'm just going to counter this with a point. You see, if your laptop is going to be powerful enough for you 8, 9, 10 years down the road, then that means that you've overspec'd it. It's more than you need right now. And speccing something to meet your requirements 10 years in the future, that's quite an ask. I guess what I'm getting to is that if you don't need that much performance, you could buy a much cheaper laptop and replace it more regularly and stay current. So there's another way of looking at it. So 3 years is probably a little bit on the short side, but there is a reason for doing that, and that is that we can recycle the equipment. So used values on Apple laptops typically are pretty strong at the 3 to 4 year point, but also we might reuse it within our business, so cycle it down, get another 3 years use out of it. So when I say I changed my laptop at 3 years, it doesn't mean it gets thrown away. In fact, mine is already being used by another member of staff, so that'll get used for another 3 years, and we'll probably replace the battery in that time and get the most out of it. But when it comes to a desktop machine, I suppose the upgrade cycle is typically going to be a bit longer. Now, I think about my PC workstation that I got at home. I bought that over 4 years ago, and I don't feel any need to replace that. I mean, I did buy way more than I needed, I suppose, in basically doing exactly what I've just argued against. Typically with a desktop PC, you can upgrade it. I can change the RAM, I can change the storage. And I'm also going to stop so that you can see these lovely cows behind me. Look at these lovely chaps. Anyway, let's walk back this way and might get a glimpse of this amazing country house, which is completely empty at the moment. How often would you change a desktop computer? I mean, I typically would expect a desktop machine to last longer. There's no reason really why I couldn't be using my PC workstation another 4 years down the line. But a lot of that is because I've been able to do midterm upgrade. And you can't do that with your Mac, because with Apple Silicon, everything's become consumerized, commoditized. You know, you've got this computer with everything soldered on. You've got to get the memory right when you buy it. Yeah, you've got to get your storage right to a degree. Of course, with Thunderbolt 4 and Thunderbolt 5, external storage is the way to go. But really, we've got to the point where, with Apple Kit anyway, you've got to assess the desktops in the same way that you're assessing laptops. I guess the only difference is there isn't a battery degrading away in there. It does get you to think. Obviously, Apple, for all of their claims about being green, and any other PC manufacturer as well, they want you to buy new machines. They don't benefit from the used market. They need you to be buying their hardware so that they continue to make money for their shareholders, and that's what they're in the business of doing. Computers are moving forwards at a pace. We're getting bigger generational leaps than perhaps we have done in the past. That's not to say that we've never had big generational leaps. We have, but now it seems to be fairly consistent. I mean, later this year, Apple will bring out an M5 chip, and I don't expect that to be quite as much of a leap forward as M4 was compared to M3, but who knows what Apple has up their sleeves and what they're going to do. And they are just pushing the boundaries, and that is causing Intel and AMD to push their boundaries too, and also new players in the Windows on ARM market. So you've got Qualcomm, and their first outing with the X Elite chip was really good. I imagine their next one will be even better. Nvidia has thrown their hat in the ring. They're saying that they're going to build ARM chips, and if they couple that up with a really good GPU, that is going to be very compelling. And again, it just it pushes everything along, this power efficiency, but you're not paying anything for the power efficiency with ARM. That's what makes it so great. You're still getting the performance. The whole computing landscape is changing for the better as a result of, I think, Apple pushing boundaries. They were happy to stagnate and take your money every year for iterative upgrades, and they got lazy. And that's how Apple has stolen a march on them and gotten ahead of the game. The M4 is the fastest performing chip for single core computing, as far as I'm aware, at time of recording. It is mind-blowing. You use those machines and they're just so slick and snappy and instant. And it's hard to imagine that 3 years down the line, it's not going to be snappy and instant. And I suspect anybody who's watching this who's got an Apple Silicon machine will say the same thing, that my M1 is still plenty quick enough, still feels great to use. The only thing that's probably affecting them is that this Apple Intelligence stuff that's running in the background and consuming memory means that those models that had a miserly 8 gigabytes of unified memory are probably starting to feel that now. So yeah, maybe 3 years is a bit soon to upgrade a laptop, but if you are a consumer and you're thinking about that, just remember there's always a market for your used machine when it's 3 to 4 years old. If you've looked after it, if it's still got more than 80% battery life, which they should have at that age, should be about 85% depending on how you use it, you're probably going to get 40 to 50% of what you paid for the machine back in a used sale. And you could put that then towards the next machine, so you get to stay current. And I say stay current, but nothing stays current for very long, particularly with Apple. You buy something and they're immediately releasing something better. There's always something better down the line. You also get a lot of people who say, well, I'm going to wait for X generation of chip because that's going to be so much better. It's like, yeah, there'll always be one better. When you buy that M8 that you're holding out for, well, guess what? Apple's going to bring out the M9 and it'll be better. You're only current for a few months after you've bought your machine, maximum a year before the next best thing comes out. So the way I look at it is once every 3 to 4 years I'll be current with my machine, and I'll have the latest and greatest, and otherwise there'll be something better out there. What does it matter? Buy the machine that you need, that meets your needs right now. Use it for as long as it is financially sensible to do so. When you factor in all of the costs involved in running a computer, and that includes thinking about your next purchase and how you fund that. So if you need your laptop to help you fund the next purchase, then a 3 to 4 year upgrade cycle is probably about right. If on the other hand you need to eke your computer out for as long as possible, consider the spec that you're buying, and maybe do a cost comparison. Is it cheaper to buy the top spec machine that's way more than you actually need just so that you can eke it out for 10 years? Or would it actually be cheaper to buy 3 MacBook Airs in the same period and have great performance? Because when you look at those new generations, the M4, just the M4 chip on its own is outperforming M2 Pro. It's quite incredible the leap forwards that you get. So you could go all out and spec out this amazing Pro chip or Max chip MacBook Pro and find that in terms of just sort of general computing performance and graphics performance, the basic M chip a couple of generations later will be catching up and maybe overtaking. In the PC sphere, PC laptops don't hold their value in the same way that Apple laptops do. So the math involved in thinking about when you upgrade is completely different, for me anyway. And when it comes to desktop machines, again, I don't think you can compare Apple and PC anymore, because Apple desktop machines are basically laptops without batteries. It's the same chips, it's the same stuff in them. It's just a cheaper way of getting the chip you want and being able to use it in a desktop form factor. With PCs, of course, you get the ability to upgrade, but how often do we actually do an upgrade? Everybody's different, aren't they? But being able to pop a bit of extra memory in, or extra storage, which is what I've done with my workstation, or a mid-term upgrade of the GPU, I think that's kind of cool. Anyway, some rambling thoughts there on when should we upgrade our computers. Am I absolutely insane to upgrade my laptop every 3 years? I'm sure that plenty of people will say that I am and that you shouldn't do that. But we're all approaching things with different perspectives, different ways of calculating the value of a machine. And for me, I like to stay current. But I also don't like throwing machines away. So I like to make sure that after I finish using a machine, someone else is going to get a meaningful life out of it as well. So I think that's just important to say. And I'm just going to finish up by spinning the camera around, and just off in the distance there you can see the lovely country house. Anyway, I think that's probably enough of my rambling. Have you got some thoughts? When do you upgrade your machine? What are your criteria for considering upgrades and the life of your machine? How do you assess the value of your machine? And has it been good, the whole Apple Silicon thing? Is it good for PC users as well as Apple users? Let me know in the comments. I'll see you again soon for some more geekery.